The sky above Coruscant has always been an order. Flight paths curve like synchronized stars, blinking with the efficiency of 1 trillion systems working in silent harmony. There are lanes for senators, lanes for traders, lanes for the Jedi, and even lanes for those who know how to avoid being seen. But tonight, the sky fractures. It doesn't scream, it exhales. A long, slow breath of heat and smoke and intent. Most citizens won't notice it, not yet. They're asleep in towers high above the noise, or deep below in zones where stars haven't shone in centuries. But something has begun, and by the time anyone understands what it is, it will already be too late. From orbit, they fall. Not in swarms, but in orchestrated silence. Ships shaped like daggers, their hulls blackened with anti-scan coating, descend through thin bands of compromised atmosphere. They don't come through spaceports or civilian corridors. These ships were built to slip through cracks, diplomatic blind spots, outdated security tunnels, shadow routes known only to the dying breed of cartographers who remember the wars before the Clone Wars. Within them, Mandalorians sit in perfect silence, their helmets sealed, their heartbeats even. They do not speak, they do not pray, they prepare. The first one touches down on level 3207, a zone not known for politics or wealth or light. It's the kind of place where security checks happen in bulk and drones outnumber residents. But the drones don't respond to the descending craft. They've been spoofed, their feeds replaced with old looped footage. In the brief moment between reality and response, the hatch hisses open, and 6 Mandalorians in midnight armor step into the shadows of the capital world. They do not run, they do not fire, they vanish. Across Coruscant, more landings follow. Subtle punctures in a city that believes itself invulnerable. Dropships disguised as freight haulers slipped through utility shafts. A patrol tower goes dark and doesn't come back online. In the plaza below the Senate Rotunda, a fountain stops flowing. To most, these are glitches, minor failures in a city that handles trillions. But to those watching closely, to the Jedi, the silence is screaming. At the Jedi Temple, an initiate stirs in her sleep. She dreams of iron wings, of burning stars, of the sound metal makes when it cuts through atmosphere. Her master, seated in meditation, feels the tremor and opens his eyes slowly. Across the temple, others begin to feel it too, that tug at the edge of the Force, not dark, not loud, but heavy, like the sound of ancient footsteps returning to a place long forgotten. Coruscant has been attacked before, but not like this. This isn't a fleet screaming into orbit with banners raised. This is something older, smarter, surgical. At 0303 local time, the planetary traffic control grid registers a 0.4-second spike in unauthorized data flow, So small it's dismissed as background noise. But in that moment, 5 internal firewalls are overwritten. A signal pings directly into the subterranean infrastructure of the works, the industrial labyrinth deep beneath the city's foundations, and doors that haven't opened in decades slide open in perfect silence. No alarms, no witnesses, just movement. In the Senate compound, guards begin to fidget. Their security dashboards display green, all systems nominal. But the silence outside is wrong. Too still. The ambient whir of the city seems dampened, and for a heartbeat they wonder if the windows are sealed too tightly tonight. Then a proximity alert pings. One of the spire entrances has lost external camera feed. A tech shrugs it off, resets the subroutine, and looks away. He never sees the dark figure glide across the sky bridge. Elsewhere, a Mandalorian unit ascends a power conduit, climbing toward the judicial arcology. Their boots make no sound. Their weapons are slung, safeties off. One carries a folding charge shaped like a ceremonial crest. Another bears a dark saber variant, a blade passed down through a line that never forgot the humiliation of Sundari. These aren't mercenaries. They are clan-born, trained not just in war, but in meaning. Every footstep is a promise. By the time the first explosion strikes, a controlled detonation that collapses a support strut under a minor transport hub, dozens of Mandalorians have already infiltrated the city's lower command network, each one with a target, each one with a route, and above them all, Coruscant still blinks and breathes like nothing has changed. But the Jedi know. Master Yoda stands in a quiet corridor, gazing out into the night with his brow furrowed beneath heavy ears. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. But he feels it, the return of something long buried. A people who once brought the galaxy to its knees in a 1,000-year war. A people who once fought the Jedi not out of darkness, but out of creed. And now they are here, in the heart of the Republic, not in conquest, in precision. One night, one chance, and the sky is already burning. The underlevels of Coruscant have never truly slept. Even in the depths of night, when the great sky lanes above dim and the Senate's voice falls silent, the city's bones remain alive. Industrial arteries churn sludge through forgotten chambers. Power converters hum against Duracrete walls stained with centuries of ash. And somewhere down here, among rusted ventilation shafts and blinking emergency lights, something begins to stir. They don't use doors. Mandalorians don't knock when entering a battlefield, and the Undercity is nothing less. The first breach is made just above the old Black Sun storage tunnels, a forgotten corridor now used by scavenger bands and night crawlers. A sealed blast door, welded shut 2 decades ago, folds inward with surgical grace. A shaped charge cuts it open like wet cloth, and 6 armored figures glide inside. The Mandalorians move in perfect silence. Their boots absorb sound. Their armor disperses heat. Their visor displays are connected to one another through an encrypted signal net that makes speech unnecessary. Every movement is prearranged, every route memorized. This isn't their first infiltration. It may be their last, but it is not their first. The air here is dense with chemical residue and the faint scent of burnt ozone. Pipes overhead leak steam in high-pitched gasps. Somewhere nearby, a droid mutters a corrupted binary phrase to itself. The Mandalorians don't glance at it. Their path is clear, deeper into the foundations, toward the city's forgotten arteries. They are heading not toward the Senate or the Temple, not yet. First, they must ensure the lights go out when they need to. First, they disable the heart. The sabotage begins with a substation. No guards, just maintenance drones and a few sleeping techs. The drones are fried instantly by an electromagnetic pulse from a wrist-mounted emitter. The techs are left unharmed, unconscious but breathing. One Mandalorian places a small cube on the primary relay board. It hums, activates, and begins quietly rewriting power distribution protocols across 8 districts. Streetlights flicker far above. Traffic grid buffers slow by 12 milliseconds. In a city of this scale, that's enough to cause ripples. They move again, ghost-like, splitting into 2 teams. One heads toward a long-forgotten transit hub, buried beneath a once-sealed section of the industrial underways. This place hasn't seen traffic since the end of the Stark hyperspace war. Still, the tramways remain, linked by backup grid lines no one ever decommissioned. In 20 minutes, this tunnel will carry a stolen tram directly beneath the Senate's base foundation. Not to breach it, but to shake it. A show of strength designed to trigger a specific defensive response. When that happens, eyes will turn upward. The true infiltration will come from below. The second team heads for the Temple District, not to attack, but to observe. Mandalores have long understood their ancient rivals. They know the way Jedi sense disturbances, and so they move with stillness, dampening their presence in the Force. Not invisible, but unreadable, like a shadow with no source. They pass under sacred halls and feel the hum of crystals stored in deep meditation chambers. The Jedi above remain unaware, save for a few. One of them is Master Sindralig. He walks the halls this night not out of worry, but habit. Something about the night is wrong. He doesn't hear footsteps, doesn't see flickering motion, but his instincts itch, the way they did on Atravis during the rebellion. He pauses near a chamber entrance, senses the absence of presence. Below him, the Mandalorians pause as well. They do not engage, they simply watch, record, transmit. Far beneath the temple, where the lower foundations connect with ancient Republic sewers, the last team of Mandalorians enters what used to be a Sith cult's forgotten crypt. They light the walls with their visor beams, scanning carvings that no Coruscant citizen has seen in centuries. One of them marks a sigil in chalk, the Mythosaur crest, flanked by twin blades. It is not vandalism. It is a signature. By now, Jedi Council monitors are flashing faint alerts. Nothing conclusive. Minor fluctuations, power diversions, a small explosion in a subgrid. These things happen. A planetary city of this size experiences anomalies. But there is a feeling creeping in the back of their minds, something quiet and old and cold. In the Grand Convocation Chamber, a few senators remain for late-night sessions. One of them looks up from her datapad and notices the shadows on the ceiling aren't behaving properly. She doesn't raise an alarm, but she does excuse herself. Moments later, her bodyguard is found unconscious in the corridor. No signs of trauma, just silence. Above ground, nothing has exploded. There are no screams, no blaring alarms. But below, in the underlevels, the Mandalorians now control 43 structural nodes, 6 transit access ways, and a third of the East Industrial Zone's power grid. The blade is drawn, but not yet swung. They are the ghost of an old war, reborn not in legions, but in whispers. And Coruscant hasn't even begun to understand what's come for it. The Senate Rotunda is among the most guarded structures in the galaxy. Layers of security, both technological and bureaucratic, weave a nearly impenetrable net over the dome where laws are passed, alliances are shattered, and power is traded behind polished smiles. But like all grand buildings, its greatest weakness isn't the walls, it's the assumptions of those within them. The breach happens just before 0400 Standard Time, when most senators have retired and the night shift guards are yawning through silent corridors. A glider ship, designed to mimic Republic diplomatic shuttles, coasts to a halt on a minor landing pad reserved for emergency senatorial transport. Its IFF code is accepted without hesitation, copied days earlier from a senator's actual shuttle during routine maintenance. The docking clamps engage, the ramp lowers, and 6 Mandalorians step into the sanctum of the Republic without raising a single alarm. They do not storm. They walk in formation. They are dressed not in full combat gear, but in ceremonial beskar, muted, burnished, devoid of the usual iconography. One wears a flowing half-cloak, another a helm crowned with a circlet that harks back to the days of the Mandalores. These aren't assassins. They are symbols. The corridors near the upper legislative chambers are quiet, manned by clone guards who glance up briefly as the figures pass. Their minds register the IFF codes, the false clearances, the slow, purposeful gait of high-level envoys. None think to question it until one does. A sergeant from the 501st squints too long. He doesn't draw a weapon, but his hand rests on the grip of his blaster. One of the Mandalorians nods slowly at him. No threat, no challenge. The sergeant lets them pass, a strange sense of reverence pulling at his instincts. Something about them feels ancient. He won't know it until later, but he'll be the only clone to remember their faces clearly. Once inside the rotunda's outer ring, the Mandalorians split. Two remain at the entry corridor, silent sentinels. The others descend into the administrative access tunnels that coil beneath the dome like veins. These service halls were designed for maintenance droids and staffers, never meant to host warfare. And yet, the Mandalorians map them perfectly. They don't bring charges. Not yet. What they bring is calibration. Each floor has embedded circuitry for emergency lockdown, a function the Senate designed to protect itself. The Mandalorians are here to reverse that, to lock others out while they remain inside. Their slicing equipment is minimal, but deadly effective. Within 12 minutes, they've embedded signal seeds into the emergency architecture. With a single activation later, they could isolate the rotunda from the rest of the city, cut off communications, collapse shielding, even vent the chambers if they wished. But they don't use it. Not yet. This isn't a massacre. This is a test of nerve. On the upper floor, in a shadowed observation gallery, a lone senator sits watching the Senate floor, now empty, save for janitorial droids. She wears ceremonial robes, though her rank is minor. Her eyes narrow as she notices a flicker on the distant display, movement that shouldn't be there. She isn't a fool, and she knows that armor. Mandalorians. Instead of panicking, she rises slowly, stepping back into the shadows and activating a secure comm, not to the Senate Guard, but to her private channel. Her aide will receive a single word: retreat. By the time she leaves the gallery, the Mandalorians are gone from sight. In the central atrium, a shadow passes beneath the skylight. Another team has scaled the outer tower and now descends silently toward the mid-spire decks, where confidential committee rooms lie nestled in polished corridors. There's no intent to bomb, to destroy, or even to kill. They're here to stand in places they should never be allowed to stand, to prove they can. One stops before a massive window and gazes out toward the glimmering Jedi temple in the distance. A red light pulses softly in his gauntlet, the silent signal from the teams below. All objectives met, no detection. The time to escalate has not yet come. but they are inside, fully, in the most sacred political structure in the Republic, and no one knows. In the control rooms, technicians run routine diagnostics, unaware that the very systems they trust are compromised. Guards remain bored, standing watch over empty halls. The sky remains quiet, the sirens still silent. But the breach has happened. The rotunda has been pierced. And the next move belongs not to the Jedi, not to the Senate, but to the Mandalorians who now wait in the walls. The Jedi Temple doesn't shake, not often, not unless something is deeply wrong. But tonight, the ancient structure seems to hum with anticipation, as if the stone itself senses a storm not yet born. Wind doesn't normally howl through its meditation balconies. Crystals stored in the temple's deeper vaults don't usually resonate without guidance. And yet, in the silent hours before Coruscant's false dawn, the Jedi Temple breathes in, a long, quiet breath before battle. Master Shaak Ti feels it first, not through the Force exactly, but in the tension of her spine as she paces the long inner walkway near the initiate dormitories. Her leku twitch. There is movement, coordinated, subtle, happening beyond her reach. She doesn't sense fear. She senses intention, a decision being made not in anger, but with purpose. In the war room high in the spire, Obi-Wan Kenobi watches hollows of incomplete reports. Something has disrupted surveillance in Sector 7G, and transmission records from 2 Senate skiffs don't match planetary logs. The anomalies are small, deniable, but they're stacking like stones on a grave. He doesn't panic. Instead, he calmly alerts temple security to increase surveillance, quietly. Down below, Anakin Skywalker is wide awake, standing barefoot in the center of a darkened corridor. He says nothing, but he feels it too. Something ancient is watching the temple, not with hatred, with precision, and strangely, with familiarity. Within minutes, Jedi younglings are quietly stirred from their beds, not with alarm, but with calm instruction. It's a precaution, the masters say, a midnight drill. The children obey, shuffling in whispering groups toward secured chambers. Their instructors' faces are composed, but beneath that serenity lies a current of dread. Jedi sense things not as they appear, but as they lean, and right now the world is leaning toward war. In the central tower, the Jedi Guard begins a silent shift rotation despite no scheduled threat. Robed figures in golden masks move like ghosts between marble pillars, carrying electropikes that hum softly in the air. Their formation changes, subtly, to cover the temple's lower access points, and none of them speak as they do so. In the hangars, support droids deactivate temporarily, not due to sabotage, but to a coded pulse sent from outside the temple. Maintenance crews scramble to reboot systems. Flight records disappear for 8 minutes before returning, slightly altered. Only a single Jedi Knight stationed near the bay notices the irregularity, and she's already moving toward the anomaly before calling it in. The Jedi don't scream when invaded. They prepare, they focus, and tonight they begin to realize something that hasn't happened in centuries is beginning to unfold. The temple itself may become a battlefield. At the top of the archives, Jocasta Nu stirs from her sleep, not out of instinct, but memory. The last time she felt this pressure in the Force, she was barely a Padawan, and the Mandalorians were still licking their wounds from the last great purge. She lights a low beacon, not an alert, but a pulse, and descends into the halls of data like a librarian preparing for siege. The holomaps begin to distort. Minor errors, just a few misaligned coordinates, but they appear only on maps tied to the planetary infrastructure. It's not a coincidence. The Mandalorians aren't just attacking from above or below. They are mapping the temple in real time, locating not just its doors, but its arteries. And yet, the temple resists, not with weapons, but with awareness. As the Jedi walk their halls, many of them realize that the time for pure diplomacy has passed. Their sabers remain unlit, but the hilts are close to hand. A calm has settled over the temple, not serenity, but the calm of focus before war. A focus only the Jedi know how to wield. In the training halls, lights flicker. In the observatories, stars begin to fade behind storm clouds gathering in Coruscant's upper atmosphere. Clouds the weather systems didn't predict. In the inner sanctum, Master Windu walks alone through the chamber of still voices, his brow furrowed and his hand at his belt. He doesn't know where the attack will come from, but he knows now, without doubt, that it will. Across the temple, an old statue, one from the Mandalorian Wars, stands at the edge of a garden where few now walk. The base of it has cracked, not from time, but from something recently placed beneath it. Small, round, metallic, a listening device. They are being watched, and worse, they are being measured. The temple holds its breath and waits. The Sark district is one of the oldest sectors of Coruscant, a dome-shaped metropolitan zone once built as a tribute to the old industrial barons during the Republic's expansionist age. Over time, its use shifted from trade and factories to museums, civic archives, and high-end residential towers clinging to the upper rim. Locals call it the Crown Basin, a polished monument to layers of old wealth and newer secrets. But tonight, that crown cracks. At 0437 Standard Time, a seismic detonation ripples through the base of the dome. Not an explosion in the typical sense, not loud, not visible from above. It's a precise, low-frequency charge designed to weaken key support columns that date back 5 centuries. The dome doesn't collapse, it sighs. From a distance, the tremor looks like a minor quake, but within the SOC district, glass fractures, support beams twist, the dome shudders in on itself in slow motion, not with the chaos of a disaster, but with the surgical precision of a building being carefully pulled apart from below. The result is panic. Upper-tier citizens, many of them minor political figures, ambassadors or military families, suddenly find themselves surrounded by dust and cascading debris. Lights go out. Hover cars spin and crash. Emergency beacons trigger in dozens of apartments at once. And above it all, emergency drones scramble with false data, overwhelmed by a storm they didn't see coming. This wasn't just sabotage, it was timed. The collapse is synchronized with Coruscant's planetary alert protocols. As the dome cracks, 5 other districts go dark due to malfunction reports generated by falsified data packets seeded in the prior hour by Mandalorian slicers. The result is chaos across the grid. And for the Jedi, it's a test, one that could mean the temple is next. Master Plo Koon responds first, his ship streaking above the collapsing dome, scanning for survivors and signs of enemy presence. He doesn't find explosives, he finds signatures, subtle energy patterns that suggest the presence of Mandalorian mining tech, modified for urban warfare. Tools designed not to destroy cities, but to fold them open like puzzle boxes. On the ground, clone shock troopers from the Coruscant Guard move in, but the streets are too narrow, too fractured. And worse, the Mandalorians are already gone. They didn't collapse the dome to trap anyone. They collapsed it to trigger the city. Within minutes, the Senate Security Bureau initiates lockdown protocols across the core district. Emergency power floods into defensive shields. Air traffic halts. Checkpoints are raised. It's the exact response the Mandalorians predicted. And while the bureaucrats react to the dome's fall, they don't realize they've given the enemy the one thing they needed most: time. Below the fractured foundation of SOC, a hidden tunnel reactivates. Once a part of the old service loop that ran between the industrial core and the Senate precinct, it's long been sealed. Tonight, it opens, and 4 Mandalorian commandos move through it, unseen. Their objective is not military. It's philosophical. They carry no explosives, just encrypted data rods, forged credentials, and relics, pieces of Mandalorian iron smelted in the fires of Concordia and stamped with forgotten clan seals. They're here not to destroy. They're here to remind the Republic of something older than politics, that the Mandalorian spirit cannot be buried under concrete and peace treaties. and they leave signs. In the collapsed ruins of the Sock Dome, one emergency responder finds an odd object, a small, sealed box untouched by fire or rubble. Inside, resting on black velvet, is a single mythosaur tooth, real, ancient. And beside it a message in Old Mandoea: "We remember." When the Senate High Council receives the report, they understand the meaning. This wasn't an act of war. It was an announcement. And in the temple spire, Obi-Wan Kenobi whispers the words to himself as he reads the recovered transmission. They want us to know they were here, not as terrorists, not as conquerors, but as ghosts reclaiming their place in history. And Coruscant, the heart of the Republic, has just been reminded that it is not untouchable. Far from the burning rubble of Sock, away from the lights of the Senate, lies the hushed stillness of the Jedi archives. Nestled deep within the temple, the archives are one of the most protected knowledge banks in the galaxy, not because of their military value, but because of what they hold: memory, legacy, and truth. Truth that spans millennia. And tonight, someone walks its marble corridors not to destroy, but to seek. At first, it seems impossible. Security protocols are active. The temple is on high alert. Guards patrol the vaults. Jedi archivists are present, and sensor systems hum softly along the curved halls. But when Master Jocasta Nu arrives at section Kresh Zerek 7, the low light flickers once, briefly, as though something passes unseen just beyond reach. She senses it immediately. A presence not unfamiliar, but wrong. It is not steeped in the dark side, nor aligned with any signature of the light. It is muted, masked, like a shadow carrying a forgotten name. One Mandalorian is here, alone. He entered through one of the temple's subterranean passages during the chaos above. While the Jedi prepared for attacks on their hangars, council chambers, and youngling wards, he moved quietly toward the very heart of their knowledge. Not for sabotage, not to plant bombs, but for understanding. He is unarmed, save for a vibro dagger strapped to his thigh and a small data scanner affixed to his gauntlet. His armor is old, not weathered, but ancient, red and gold, trimmed with cracked enamel. His steps make no sound. The fabric draping over his right shoulder is faded, embroidered with sigils lost even to most Mandalorian clans. He is a relic, and he is here to find another. Moving among the aisles, he brushes his hand across one console, then another, bypassing interfaces with a mix of old command codes and localized electrospikes. He doesn't copy records wholesale. He's not interested in the Galactic Registry or Senate proceedings. He searches the restricted database, the sealed scrolls, looking for something specific. And then he finds it. A record dating back to the Mandalorian excision, the Jedi-led operation that broke the last great Mandalorian dynasty. The record is redacted, sealed by the Council's oldest protocols. Names hidden, locations erased, but the date remains, and he knows what happened that day. He downloads only that one file. At that moment, Master Nu turns the corner and sees him. Their eyes meet, hers wide with recognition, his unreadable behind his T-shaped visor. But there is no blaster raised, no saber drawn. The Mandalorian simply lowers his head slightly, a nod not of surrender, but of acknowledgement. "You should not be here," she says softly. "It was," he replies, "long before you." The voice is old, not with age, but with grief. The silence that follows stretches across centuries. She could strike. She is not helpless, but she doesn't. Instead, she asks, "Why now?" He turns to the shadows, the sealed scroll now embedded in his gauntlet. "Because your order erased too much, and one day you'll need to remember why we stopped asking." He walks past her. She doesn't stop him. When the security alert is finally triggered by a passive tripwire in a lower hallway, he is already gone. No trace, no breach points, no casualties. Just a missing file, a flicker in the archives, and a ripple in the Force. When the Council meets to review the anomaly, Yoda says nothing at first. He simply gazes at the table before him, fingers tented, eyes closed. Then, finally, he murmurs, "Looking for truth he was, perhaps finding more than we ever did." And so the Mandalorian who entered the Jedi's most sacred chamber leaves not with stolen plans, but with a story. One the Jedi buried, one the Mandalorians never forgot. And now the balance of memory has shifted. Above Coruscant, the orbital perimeter begins to shift. Defense satellites that have been dormant for years rotate into active position. Energy shields spool up across key government structures. Fighter patrols double. The Chancellor's Guard is placed on high alert. To most, this looks like a defensive measure, but the Mandalorians see it for what it is: overcorrection. And overcorrection means opportunity. In the dizzying height of the planet's upper atmosphere, in a layer of air traffic so thick it forms its own weather, a single Mandalorian strike vessel floats among diplomatic cruisers and cargo haulers. It's disguised as a traffic control drone, its plating scorched and its signal profile buried inside layers of Republic software. To the orbital monitoring station, it's invisible. Inside the ship, 5 Mandalorians sit in silence, armor reflecting the soft red glow of atmospheric fire. Their visors display telemetry in real time, the pulse of the city, the movements of clones, the shifting patrols of Jedi. But they are not preparing for battle. They are preparing for broadcast. At 0508, Coruscant's emergency comm network flickers. Thousands of data pads, holo displays, traffic signals, and emergency billboards blink once and then shift. The official security warning dissolves into static, and then a symbol appears, the mythosar, burned in red light, ancient, defiant. And then a voice, distorted but calm, clear despite encryption layers. Coruscant, city of illusion, heart of a republic built on buried bones. We are not your enemy. We are the memory you tried to erase. All over the planet, beings of every species stop. Shopkeepers in the mid-level districts, hover taxi pilots, factory workers, slicers, even Senate staffers on break, all look up, all hear it. We do not come for war. We come to remind you what peace without respect becomes: a prison. The message is only 90 seconds long. No threats, no demands. Just a reminder. A reclamation of identity in the face of silence. But the effect is nuclear. The Republic assumes it's a precursor to invasion. They scramble interceptors. The Jedi Council convenes a flash session. Intelligence officers pour through signal paths, trying to isolate the source. But the Mandalorians don't wait. The transmission ends, the signal dissolves, and the false drone detonates in orbit, its parts vaporized in the upper atmosphere. No trail, no debris, just a memory. In the temple, Mace Windu's voice is low and controlled. They're not trying to defeat us, he says. They're trying to outmaneuver us in the realm of belief. Yoda nods, but his gaze is distant. What's more dangerous than a warrior? A warrior who knows he cannot win and no longer cares. A warrior who fights not for land or credit or power, but for the right to exist in memory. And Mandalorians understand memory better than anyone. The broadcast changes things. Across the Senate, panic breaks out. Politicians demand immediate military response. The Chancellor, veiled in emergency shadows, begins drafting new wartime protocols. Public confidence wavers. The people of Coruscant, who believed themselves untouchable, now whisper the unthinkable, that the city itself is vulnerable. And yet, among the noise, something else begins to bloom. Curiosity. In the depths of the HoloNet, the message is dissected, remixed, spread across encrypted forums and open feeds. Old debates reignite. Were the Mandalorians ever truly defeated? Were they villains or simply enemies of a republic that couldn't tolerate strength outside its control? In a corner of level 5127, a young slicer stares at the sigil frozen on his screen and feels something stir. Not fear, not loyalty, something else. Something like wonder. And just like that, the Mandalorians accomplish what no weapon ever could. They make themselves impossible to forget. Amidst the planetary maelstrom, where sirens ring and Senate chambers smolder in heated panic, an unnoticed storm begins to build inside the one structure meant to resist it all, the Jedi Temple. But the disturbance does not come from outside. It arises within, not from enemies, but from memory. It starts when Master Ki-Adi-Mundi is reviewing the coded remnants of the Mandalorian transmission. He notes something, not in the message's content, but in its cadence, its phrasing. The voice, though masked, carries an archaic dialect of Mondoa, one not spoken since the final days of the Mandalorian Crusades. A dialect lost, or so it was believed, during the purge that followed the Republic's rise. He orders the audio passed through temple archives, and there, buried in fragments, he finds a match. A name, a clan that had once signed peace with the Jedi, only to be betrayed. He doesn't say it aloud, not yet. He simply closes the file and stares at his reflection in the dark glass. For a moment he sees not himself, but another, a boy in a helmet, firelight dancing across his armor, watching his city burn while Jedi transports hovered in the sky above. Elsewhere, in the temple's meditation chamber, Ahsoka Tano sits cross-legged. Her eyes are closed, her breath slow. But in her mind, the Force whispers louder than it should. Images of fire, of a city with no name, of masked warriors standing in the ruins, weapons sheathed. It is not a vision of war. It is a memory, but not hers. When she opens her eyes, she speaks quietly. They're not angry at us. They're mourning something. Anakin, standing nearby, frowns as he repeats, "Mourning." Ahsoka nods, like they lost something they can't name. And now they're trying to remember it by walking into the places we told them they didn't belong. Anakin doesn't speak, but he understands, because he knows what it feels like to be told you do not belong. That afternoon, the Jedi Council meets again, for the third time in 12 hours. The hollow projections flicker with urgency. They're destabilizing the very idea of Coruscant, and they're not even firing a shot. Yoda's voice is soft. Seeds planted long ago, now only harvest we see. There is disagreement. Some masters want immediate retaliation. Others urge restraint. But there is one thing they all share now: doubt. Doubt not in their strength, but in their certainty. And the Mandalorians feed on that doubt. In the outer districts, whispers of the Mandalorians grow. Children mimic their armor with scrap metal. Street artists paint sigils on alley walls. In bars and underworld dens, even spice runners begin to speak their name with a kind of reverence, not because of destruction, but because of discipline, of myth, of presence. Mandalorians have become symbols, and symbols are more dangerous than bombs. That night, as the temple quiets once more, Obi-Wan walks the southern colonnade alone. He gazes out over the city, the flickering lights, the distant sparks of a recovering skyline. He whispers to himself, "They came here to remind us we're not the only keepers of legacy." Behind him, footsteps. It's Master Yoda. They remind us of more than that. They remind us that truth outlives even Jedi. Obi-Wan doesn't answer, because the wind has shifted, and he knows now the Mandalorians haven't lost their war. They've just begun a new one. One not of territory, but of memory. Deep beneath the surface of Coruscant, where the city's polished elegance gives way to shadowed depths and ancient infrastructure, a vault hums back to life. It's not connected to the main grid. It's not mapped. And until now, it hadn't been opened in almost a century. The Republic called it a fail-safe archive, a place to store sensitive tech too dangerous to destroy and too valuable to trust to central records. The Jedi knew of it, but few had ever walked its halls. It had no name, only a designation, Vault K776. And tonight, someone unlocks it. No alarm sound, no gates crash open, just a low mechanical clack as the vault's reinforced doors disengage after decades in slumber. Inside, 3 Mandalorians step into a cold, dust-choked chamber. Their armor gleams softly in the light of their HUDs. One kneels, opening a narrow case from his belt. Inside, a key. Not digital, not mechanical. It's an old shard of Beskar, cut and shaped long ago to match a ceremonial lock forged during the era of the new Mandalorian pacifists. A key once thought lost in the siege of Sundari. But it was never lost. It was hidden here. And now the Mandalorians have retrieved it. Why this key? Why now? Because this vault holds more than artifacts. It holds the last complete schematics of the Mandalorian Crusader fleet, warships designed to outfly the Jedi interceptors, vessels that once harried entire core worlds, driven by crews who fought not for conquest, but for honor. The Republic
captured those schematics and sealed them here, believing them obsolete. But the Mandalorians remember, and in remembering, they resurrect. They do not take the schematics. They don't need to. One among them, a silent woman wearing crimson and black plating, lowers a memory reader to the terminal. The data transfers in silence, with no beacon or alert. Her visor flickers with ancient star maps, weapon configurations, and forgotten call signs. Above ground, no one notices a thing. But within minutes, encrypted signals flare in shadowed corners of the galaxy. Places like Concord Dawn, the shattered moon of DX-Yun, and even in the remnants of the Mandalorian enclaves on the edges of wild space. Silent notifications received only by those trained to hear them. The flame reignites. Elsewhere on Coruscant, Republic analysts pore over sensor logs, chasing ghosts. Their searches yield nothing. No breaches, no signs of enemy vessels entering orbit. As far as their systems are concerned, Mandalorian forces no longer exist in any official capacity. And yet, senators continue to resign behind closed doors. 2 are escorted out under heavy guard, not for treason, but for knowledge. They had once been part of the decision to suppress the Mandalorian cultural archives during the early years of the Clone Wars. Files had been deleted, records had been rewritten, and the Mandalorians have restored them all. On the black market HoloNet, something strange begins circulating. Scans of Mandalorian texts thought lost. Liturgies, family trees, war poems, designs of armor from before the Old Republic. Cultural gold, pieces of a stolen heritage now reassembled and scattered into public view with no explanation. It's not an attack, it's a resurgence. And as these texts spread, something else rises with them. Pride, hope. Among exiled Mandalorians across the Outer Rim, once splintered by years of defeat and diaspora, a hum begins to grow, the sound of unification. Not under a single warlord, not yet, but under a purpose. They are no longer forgotten. They are no longer voiceless. And in the silence of Vault K776, the final Mandalorian nods once, then steps back into the tunnel from which they came. As the vault seals behind them, it doesn't lock. It waits. Because now the city knows they can return whenever they wish. And there is nothing the Republic can do to stop them. The temple's alarms don't scream, they whisper. Not a full-scale breach, not a detonation, but a quiet hum across the auxiliary grid, too faint to reach the ears of ordinary temple staff. Only the guardians, the golden-masked sentinels who walk the temple's sacred inner paths, hear it. And when they do, they stop
as one. A single corridor, eastern quarter, no guards posted, no alerts, but the tremor in the force is undeniable. A Mandalorian is inside. This one wears no disguise. He doesn't hide behind stealth fields or rerouted corridors. He walks openly, calmly, wearing armor that gleams with silver and deep violet, Clan Vizsla markings, though stylized, old. His presence in the Force is muted, distant, not dark, just blank. But what he carries is not subtle. A bomb, not a crude explosive, not even a device of war. It's Mandalorian tech crafted for a singular symbolic strike, a seismic imploder. Not to kill, but to scar, to fracture the temple's central courtyard, the very plaza where Jedi meditate, train, and walk in reflection, to leave a permanent mark on Jedi stone with Mandalorian fire. Symbolism above all. But he never gets that far. 2 temple guards intercept him in the antechamber leading into the courtyard. They do not speak, they do not raise alarms, they simply move, like wind between walls. The fight is short, explosively quiet. His gauntlet launches a pulse dart. One guard deflects, the other rolls. A saber lights up, pale yellow, gleaming against armor. But the Mandalorian isn't here to win. He plants the bomb mid-duel, sliding it across the polished stone. As he's disarmed, electrostaff pressing against his chest, he triggers it, not to explode, but to count down. 20 seconds. A warning. In that moment, the second guard acts. With one hand, he locks the Mandalorian in gravity hold. With the other, he sends the imploder soaring skyward, where it crashes through the ceiling and explodes harmlessly above the training tower. A burst of sound and shattered glass, no deaths, but loud enough to shake the council chamber. The Mandalorian closes his eyes. He says nothing. He expects to be killed. But he is not. Instead, he is brought before the council, bound in energy cuffs. His helmet is not removed. His name is not given. And still, he does not speak. Mace Windu studies him. Obi-Wan paces. Yoda waits in silence. "What did you hope to accomplish?" Windu finally asks. The Mandalorian tilts his head, just slightly. "You silenced us once. I came to give you a voice you couldn't ignore." Windu leans forward. "You could have killed many. You chose not to. Why? Because that's what you would do." That answer lingers, echoes, and no one moves for a very long time.
He is eventually removed, escorted under heavy guard to a temple cell. But the Council feels no victory. The imploder's smoke still hangs over the plaza, and embedded in the shattered tile is a shard of Beskar with one word etched into it in Old Mandoa: remember. The temple will rebuild the tile, but the scar will remain. And now it's clear to all, this is not a random assault. It's a conversation, one carved into stone, into systems, into silence. And the Jedi must now decide. Do they answer, or do they wait for the next message to be louder?
Far beneath Coruscant's lower levels, even beyond the industrial zones and criminal underbellies, lies the Works, a vast subterranean sprawl of long-abandoned factories, smog-belching machines, rusted pipelines, and tech forges lost to time. It is a place where the city breathes out its forgotten lungs. No lights shine here. No air moves naturally. It's silent, except for the groans of metal and distant echoes of mechanical decay. And it's here, in the dark heart of the Works, that the Mandalorians strike again. They don't arrive in formation. They emerge, slipping through forgotten utility hatches, sewer vaults, and grav-tunnel drift shafts. 6 commandos, led by a gaunt figure wearing midnight blue Beskar, engraved with marks of Clan Varad, make their way through the maintenance levels to a sealed reactor interface node. This is not a power station. It's a control relay, one of 12 ancient grid nexus points buried under Coruscant's old layers, still quietly regulating power to defense towers, orbital beacons, and temple shields. Nobody ever thinks about it, except the Mandalorians. Their plan is as daring as it is devastating: to reroute the reactor's output into a forced surge across the Jedi Temple's auxiliary systems, temporarily frying shields, dampening sensor relays, and, if timed perfectly, unlocking a narrow 3-minute vulnerability window. It's not for an attack. It's for a message. They want the temple to feel it, to remember that even a fortress can be touched. But something goes wrong. A clone reconnaissance patrol, assigned to scout for suspected saboteurs in the lower city, picks up heat signatures. They radio it in, but static interferes, likely residual interference from the earlier orbital spoofing. By the time the clones reach the relay node, it's too late for subtlety. The Mandalorians trigger the surge. Alarms blare in the temple, lights flicker, defensive grids sputter. For exactly 2 minutes and 47 seconds, the Jedi Temple sits exposed. No weapons fire, no invasion.
but the vulnerability is felt by every Jedi on the planet.
The Force itself seems to pull tight, tense like a coiled wire ready to snap. Then, just as suddenly, the surge ends. Systems re-stabilize. The shield hums back to life. The clones below engage the Mandalorians in brutal, close-quarters combat. Blasters echo through the works. Sparks fly from durasteel pipes as vibroblades plash with reinforced plastoid armor. It's not a clean battle. It's a brawl. One Mandalorian goes down, his helmet cracking against the floor with a sickening crunch. Another, wounded, activates a detonation sequence on his wrist, but not to self-destruct, to erase evidence. The surviving commandos flee deeper into the works, melting into the labyrinth of echoing ducts and steam vents. Pursuit becomes impossible. The clones find only scrap, bodies, and the smell of burning circuitry. In the aftermath, Jedi technicians confirm the vulnerability window. The blast didn't damage anything critical, but the precision of the surge is what terrifies them most. This wasn't an act of chaos, says Master Shaak Ti. It was surgical. Yoda stands before the council and says only, "Practice this was. For what? Unknown. But test us they did." In that moment, every Jedi realizes something chilling. This was a rehearsal. The Mandalorians, with no Star Destroyers, no battle fleets, no Sith sorcery, had cracked open Coruscant's defenses with a whisper. And they hadn't even used their full strength. But perhaps most unnerving is what was left behind. On the wall of the power relay node, smeared in carbon and rust, is a symbol traced by hand, the mythosaur skull. But below it, for the first time, a new word appears in Galactic Basic, one not meant for Jedi, one meant for the people. Awake.
High above the choking atmosphere of Coruscant, in the chill silence of orbit, where the city planet's chaos is just a flickering halo of light, a single vessel remains suspended, not on any flight grid, not registered by any patrols. Its hull, painted in carbon-scorched matte, reflects no beacon. It drifts like debris, forgotten among the artificial night. But it is far from dead. Inside, Sabine Kryze watches. She stands motionless before a rotating holographic display of the surface below, her helmet resting on the stand beside her. Her violet-black hair is tied back in a sharp knot, revealing a face no longer young, no longer shaped by rebellion alone. This is not the girl who painted TIE wreckage or cracked Imperial codes for the Ghost crew. This is the tactician, the mytho-architect, the daughter of Sundari, who remembers Mandalore not as symbol, but as blood and consequence. Her armor is unlike any standard Mandalorian design. It blends art and lethality. Stylized red swirls across dark gray Beskar with deep geometric runes etched along the vambraces and collar. On her right shoulder, the sigil of Clan Ren, long dormant. On the left, a hand-sketched mythosaur, scored with faint scorch marks, reminders of fires survived and ones still to come. Sabine exhales, slowly, not out of fear, but ritual. This moment has been long in the making. On the table before her lie 12 data shards, each encoded with fragments of a plan decades in the shadows. Old data from rebel caches, Imperial defectors, purged archives, stitched together by years of silence and sacrifice. They don't form a weapon, they form a chord. And that chord will be struck tonight. She keys in a sequence. All around Coruscant, eyes turn to the sky, not because of explosions, not because of ships descending, but because, for precisely 62 seconds, the sky itself changes. A shimmering veil flickers behind the clouds, too subtle for the ordinary observer, but unmistakable to those trained in warfare. It's a signal, ancient Mandalorian fleet code, repurposed to be read only by Beskar-calibrated visors. The code doesn't call for attack, it calls for return. All across the underlayers of Coruscant, Mandalorians who had been operating in silence pause and look up. So do those in the mid-rim, in abandoned observatories, on moon bases scattered across forgotten systems. Sabine's signal reaches them all, a soft summons, not as a commander, not as ruler, as legacy.
Inside the pod, she opens a second projection, not of Coruscant, but of Mandalore as it once was. Oceans turned to glass, towers shattered and blackened by orbital fire. A dead world, yes, but not a silent one. The old transmission relays beneath the crust still breathe. She overlays both images, Mandalore and Coruscant, the dying heart and the living crown of the galaxy, and sees the shape they form together. It is not revenge she desires, it is memory. It is the power to overwrite the narrative etched by Jedi historians and Republic victors. The story where Mandalorians were always rage and ruin, never honor and resilience. Below, the Jedi scramble to identify the signal. Master Plo Koon suspects it's a trap. Others believe it's simply a bluff. But Yoda, watching the patterns with narrowed eyes, whispers only, "This is art, not weapon, message." And in that, he is correct. Sabine doesn't need to win a battle tonight. She only needs the galaxy to ask why she lit up the sky.
because questions are the seeds of doubt, and doubt erodes history faster than war ever could. She steps back from the console and walks toward the forward viewport. From here, Coruscant is a tapestry of flame and shadow. She remembers flying through its skylanes with Ezra years ago, chased by Imperial security while laughing into the comms. She remembers watching the temple from afar, wondering what kind of peace was built behind those towering walls. She speaks aloud to no one. They called us savages, but they've forgotten who taught them to fear fire. The transmission ends. The ship powers down all signal traces, reverting once again to orbital drift. Sabine returns to her seat, unlocking a private file. It's not tactical, it's personal. A message still unsent to Bo-Katan, her once rival, once mentor, may be something more complicated now. The message reads only one line: "We are still here." She doesn't send it, not yet. Below, Coruscant stirs, sleepless in its spiral of paranoia. Jedi patrols double again. Senate aides are briefed behind closed doors. HoloNet chatter spikes with theories. Is this the return of Death Watch? Is the Duchess still alive? Were the Mandalorians ever truly gone? In the refugee sectors, a child born of no clan but raised on old stories traces the shape in the sky and whispers, "That was for us." That is Sabine's true victory. She has made the forgotten remember themselves, not as victims, but as Mandalorians. And memory, once ignited, does not go quietly.
The Jedi Temple is not built for fear. Its walls, carved of timeless stone and laced with quiet humming circuitry, are designed to channel serenity, to reflect certainty. The corridors are wide, the ceilings high, open enough to let tension evaporate before it ever takes root. But tonight, the architecture does not comfort, it listens. Wind moans through the higher turrets. Archival rooms, once left unguarded, now glow with patrol lights. The meditation pools ripple without touch. The temple does not sleep. Within the council chamber, the silence is heavier than usual. The holoprojectors remain dimmed, though every master is present, not as shimmering transmissions, but in person. The weight of recent events demands bodies in the room, not just voices. Ahsoka Tano, seated at the edge of the gathering as observer, watches the subtle shifts. Mace Windu's tightened jaw, Shakti's folded hands, Ki-Adi-Mundi's troubled gaze. Even Yoda, so often calm beyond comprehension, does not move his gimmer stick tonight. The latest intelligence is projected in stark white against the holotable. Mandalorian presence confirmed in 3 sectors. Multiple clan sigils sighted, some unfamiliar, likely lost bloodlines resurfacing from exile. Sabine Wren's orbital broadcast has been decoded,
but not traced. The name Kryze is not spoken, but it hovers unspoken, like mist. We are being challenged, Windu says, not with warships, not with direct assault, but with narrative, with myth. Obi-Wan's voice is quiet. They're winning minds. And hearts, Shakti adds, not only Mandalorian ones. It is true. Across the lower levels of Coruscant, a new kind of resistance stirs. Not rebellion, not yet, but admiration. Civilians wear rebreather masks shaped like Mandalorian T-visors. Street art celebrates the lone warrior who fought 5 clone troopers to a standstill with a shield made of spare parts. Even members of the Senate, in whispers, wonder aloud if the Jedi grip on peace has grown selective. Yoda looks to the center of the room. Sabine Kryze, why now? He asks softly. The silence that follows is long, because no one has the answer.
Meanwhile, on the city's surface, the ripple continues to spread. In the shadow of the Senate Rotunda, a plaza long used for formal parades now hosts informal gatherings, not protests, not yet, just people, workers, droids, travelers, vendors, sharing datapads and passed down stories, stories that don't appear in official records. A man from Corellia recalls how his father spoke of the Mandalorian protectors during the Sith conflicts, not as raiders, but as defenders of forgotten colonies. A woman from Naboo recounts the Treaty of Concord Dawn, remembered in her family as a broken promise. A Rhodian child sketches a mythosaur into the dust of the steppes, her mother too tired to scold her. Elsewhere, in the Gargan sector, a shipment of Clone Wars-era Mandalorian armor pieces is intercepted by customs agents, only to vanish from holding cells hours later. No witnesses, no alarms, just empty crates and the faint scent of jetpack fuel in the air ducts. The Mandalorians are not attacking Coruscant, they are seeding it. Every symbol painted, every scar left in stone, every glitch in a power grid, every flicker in a shield relay, it all tells a story that spreads not with explosions, but with curiosity. And that, more than anything, begins to undo the Jedi's hold. At the Jedi archives, Jocasta Nu reads through old field reports from the pacification campaigns, reports she herself filed decades ago, back when Jedi rode gunships to remote Mandalorian colonies and labeled resistance as insurgency. She finds names listed as eliminated, only to realize now they were children, apprentices, artists, not warriors. She deletes nothing, but she adds notes, corrections, truths. The temple may stand,
but its foundation is being rewritten, not by the enemy, but by those within. Even the younglings sense it. In the initiate wing, during lightsaber drills, one student freezes mid-arc. His partner, confused, asks why. He replies, "I dreamed I was wearing different armor, not Jedi, something heavier." The instructor laughs gently. "That's just a dream." But the child doesn't laugh, because in the dream he had a name he didn't recognize, but missed. Outside, another transmission pierces the private Jedi comm channels, audio only. No demand, no declaration, just a voice, low and firm. "We do not come to burn, we come to remember. You called it peace, we lived it as silence. That silence ends tonight." The transmission ends. The voice is digitally altered, but Ahsoka feels it through the Force. The conviction, the sorrow behind the steel, and it shakes her more than any threat could. By morning, the temple gates are still intact, but inside the hearts of those who guard them, something has cracked. Not loyalty, not even faith, just the belief that history is as clean as the archives say. And the Jedi know now they have not been invaded, they've been haunted by the truth.
The hour is late, but the skies over Coruscant are far from still. Patrols streak between the spires like silver veins. Defense satellites glint faintly overhead, having just returned from a full diagnostic cycle. Every street below is a mixture of tension and forced normalcy. Markets reopening, transports moving, Jedi gliders passing overhead in slow, purposeful silence. But the Force is not silent. It is grinding, pulling. And somewhere in that current, something shifts. The Mandalorians begin to pause. At first, it is subtle. A relay station in the works doesn't receive its check-in signal. A squad of 3 commandos en route to their mech strike point near the temple's waste management tower reroutes mid-climb and disappears. In the West Quarter, a graffiti cell vanishes from a plaza they had tagged with a massive mythosaur just hours earlier. By dawn, more than half of the active Mandalorian agents on Coruscant are gone. No explosions, no farewells, just absence. The Jedi sense the change, but they don't understand it. How could they? For nights now, they've prepared for escalation. They've braced for waves. But now, when their defenses are up and ready, the assault is receding. And yet, there is no peace. Master Windu stands before the temple's forward balcony, staring out at the main thoroughfare leading toward the Senate. His brow is furrowed, not with anger, but calculation. Something is wrong. He knows war. He knows fear. But this
is withdrawal without retreat, strategy without conclusion. Yoda senses it too. He sits on the meditation dais, his eyes closed, his ears twitching every so often. The currents in the Force are no longer sharp. They're hollow, like breath exhaled and never drawn back in. Then, at 0312 Galactic Standard Time, the signal is received.
Not intercepted. Given. A frequency encoded in archaic Mandalorian military dialect, used during the final days of the new Mandalorian regime. Dead language, obsolete encryption. Except it works. Except it opens a single repeating broadcast, not visual, not auditory. It's a heartbeat. One pulse, repeated every 12 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. It echoes through Jedi systems, not loud, but deep. It syncs with the subconscious. Jedi across the temple feel their own hearts fall into rhythm with it. An entire generation trained to meditate now suddenly finds itself entrained. Obi-Wan breaks from trance first. He walks into the hall of reflection and shuts off every projection, plunging the space into shadow. He knows what this is. The Mandalorians are not attacking anymore. They are signaling the end, not of themselves, of the campaign. This has all been a demonstration, a proving, a legend brought to life. And now that the legend has been written, it must not be overwritten with failure. So they withdraw, but not in surrender. They leave because they have made their mark on the temple, on the Senate, on the people. And the Jedi, try as they might, cannot undo the echoes. They cannot chase down every sigil painted in alleyways. They cannot catch every whisper passed from child to parent, from merchant to courier. The Mandalorians did not aim to conquer the city. They aimed to haunt it, and they have. Still, not all withdrawals are clean. In the financial district, a final skirmish erupts. A lone Mandalorian operative is cornered by clone patrols and refuses surrender. The fight is fast, savage. One clone trooper is injured, another killed. The Mandalorian too falls, but only after dragging his attackers into a side tunnel and sealing it shut with an implosion grenade. No bodies recovered, no names confirmed, just sealed stone and unanswered questions. The news spreads fast. The temple debates a statement. The Chancellor's office drafts one, then retracts it. Eventually, a placeholder is uploaded to the HoloNet. Republic infrastructure preserved. Threat dissolved. Jedi vigilance successful. But no one truly believes that, because everyone has seen the scars. The Jedi Temple's central plaza remains half-scorched,
from the failed imploder. The archives are being rewritten under Jocasta's nervous gaze. Yoda meditates longer now, not in pursuit of stillness, but in search of warning. And the people of Coruscant, even those in the upper levels, have started looking up when they walk, as if expecting the sky to change again. The Mandalorians have vanished, but they've left a rhythm behind. That pulse, that memory, that slow, deliberate beat in the heart of the city. And as the sun rises on the horizon, spilling golden light across towers, still recovering from whispers of war, one truth becomes clear across all levels of Coruscant. The night didn't end because the Republic won. It ended because the Mandalorians decided it had. And somewhere in deep orbit, where no beacon points and no patrol flies, a cloaked vessel watches once more. Sabrine Kryze stands before her console, arms folded. She says nothing, because there is nothing more to say. The story has been written, and now the galaxy will carry it forward.
The Mandalorians are gone. The streets of Coruscant have quieted. The temple walls no longer flicker with interference. The skies above remain stable. The satellites no longer shifting. On the surface, the Republic breathes a collective sigh of relief. But deep within its foundations, the silence is deceptive. In the subterranean command levels of the Senate, Chancellor Mon Hollis stands before his advisory cabinet, holding a data pad with trembling hands. It displays a new report, not a military threat, but worse, a cultural shift. Civilian admiration for the Mandalorians has spiked 230% across Coruscant's middle levels. HoloNet influencers re-edit clips of Mandalorian raids, overlaying them with victorious music. Children ask for T-visor masks. Replica mythosaur pendants sell out of supply hubs in less than a day. The Jedi Council meets in emergency quorum, not because of a looming war, but because of something harder to confront: the loss of narrative control. "We fought with dignity," Mace Windu states, pacing. "We countered subterfuge, we defended civilians, and yet, the people cheer for ghosts," Ki-Adi-Mundi finishes. Even Master Plo Koon admits quietly, "Perhaps we underestimated what the symbol means to those who feel forgotten." On a distant level, Ahsoka stands in the archives, watching Jocasta Nu carefully restore a collection of pre-Clone War history scrolls. They're older than anything in common circulation. Many detail neutral systems during the Mandalorian Crusades, peaceful clans, philosophers, scientists, entire traditions lost in the shadow of war. "This was always here," Ahsoka says, running her fingers over the seal of House Eldar. Jocasta replies, without looking up, "We never needed to erase them. We only needed to ignore them." A pause, and that's what they remembered. Elsewhere, Obi-Wan receives a private transmission,
untraceable, anonymous, but he recognizes the encryption. It's Mandalorian, not military, but artisan level, the kind used in craft guilds and ancient armor workshops. The message is short. The siege was never about conquest, it was about proof. We proved that even the greatest fortress forgets to check its shadows. And if the shadows can reach the Jedi Temple, imagine where else they can go.
Obi-Wan plays it twice. Then he deletes it. Not out of fear, but because it worked. Across the galaxy, other systems begin to stir. On Corellia, a fleet yard worker paints the mythosaur skull on a discarded hull panel. On Onderon, a school teacher opens her lesson with, "Today we'll study the Mandalorians, not just their wars, but their words." On Camino, a clone trooper carves the name Tars Vizsla into the butt of his rifle, uncertain why he feels the need to remember it. And on Mandalore, what's left of it, a series of beacon lights flare briefly across the hollowed domes and scorched plains. One by one, then fade. No one records it, no one broadcasts it, but from the ashes, something stirs. The galaxy had declared the Mandalorians extinct, but now the galaxy wonders if it ever had the right. The Jedi meditate, seeking clarity, but find only echoes. The Senate speaks of investigation, but takes no action. And Sabrine cries? She has already left orbit. Her ship slides into hyperspace, destination unknown. She doesn't leave coordinates, because those who need to follow already know how. The story ends not with conquest, but with a whisper carried by thousands. We are still here. The stars above Coruscant twinkle softly now, not with urgency, not with alarms, just as stars should, distant, constant, unbothered by the tension of sentient life below. The planet spins onward, slow, measured. Far beneath the towering spires, the wind returns to the lower levels, brushing gently through alleyways once filled with boots and blasters. The mythosaur sigils remain, but no longer glow with rebellion. Now they linger like memories, murals of a message delivered, not imposed. The Jedi Temple quiets too. The great halls hum once again with calm meditation. No new attacks, no new signals, just breathing, listening. But something's changed, hasn't it? The silence now is not innocent. It's earned. It comes after sound, after meaning. And in that stillness, the Force folds back around the city. Softly. A little more complicated. A little more honest. Because stories, real ones, never vanish. They lie dormant until someone remembers. And tonight,
The galaxy remembers that once, in the heart of a sleeping republic, the Mandalorians did not conquer a world. They simply reminded it they existed. And perhaps that was enough. Sweet dreams, my dear friend.